Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Free Press live stream. My name is Rafaela, and I'm so thrilled to be joined by Amit Segal. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm more thrilled than you. Thanks, Rafaela.
Of course. Let me just introduce you to our audience. Most
Sure.
of them will already know you, of course, but for those who don't, Amit is a political commentator for Israel's Channel 12 News. His newsletter, which publishes 6 days a week, is It's Noon in Israel. It's a must-read for all of us at the Free Press office. He's also a writer for the Free Press, and he just came out with a new book that's recently been published in English. It's called A Call at 4 a.m., 13 Prime Ministers and the Crucial Decisions That Shaped Israeli Politics. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to start with the news. It's on everyone's mind, of course. About 2 weeks ago, Hamas and Israel signed this historic ceasefire agreement. It brought the living hostages home. Some of the dead hostages have been returned. Trump has called it a historic dawn, a new Middle East. But for a lot of people looking at the situation in Gaza, it doesn't quite seem that way. To start us off, do you think Trump's declaration of this historic dawn of a new Middle East was premature?
No, but it was a very optimistic perception. First of all, it's a historic decision because the Israel's longest war has basically ended. And it ended successfully with 2 out of the 3 goals of the war being already achieved. One is, of course, the hostages. And second is eliminating Hamas as an army, as a military force, and thus being reduced back to a guerrilla organization like it used to be for the last 30 years. However, the last goal of the war has not been achieved yet, which is demilitarizing Hamas and stopping it from being the ruler, the regime in Gaza. But it's not that it failed, it has not been achieved yet. It's like pressing the pause button rather than the stop. Now, yeah, sorry.
A lot of people feel like there's still IDF deployed within the Strip.
Yep.
Obviously, they're pulled back to, 53%?
53%, yeah.
And so people are saying, how can the war be over if there's still...
Okay, so
Yeah, tell me.
This is the quid pro quo, basically. Israel has declined 3 or 4 ceasefire deals because it was based on the idea of releasing all the hostages in return for an Israeli withdrawal to the last inch of Gaza. And then Israel was worried that Hamas would get away with it. I mean, it will still be a power in Gaza. Now, what Israel has achieved is the quid pro quo of withdrawal versus demilitarization and dismantling of Hamas. If it is not achieved, Israel will not withdraw. That's basically the deal. Now it's like a fork. We have 2 options. One is the American option, aka the Hamas handing over its weapons, revealing where the tunnels are, etc. If you are less optimistic, or as I say it, if you're an Israeli, you'll say, it's not going to happen because fundamentalist terrorist organizations never tend to just, surrender. And therefore, the IDF will be there to make sure that Hamas no longer possesses a threat to Israel.
I want to talk about the disarmament and what's possible and what's not possible.
Yep.
First, I just want to hit on what's happened in the past few days. Basically, on Sunday, Israel accused Hamas of breaking the ceasefire by firing at Israeli troops across the yellow line.
Right.
Hamas said they have no knowledge. We know 2 IDF soldiers were killed. Can you just tell us what happened and how the breakdown of the ceasefire began even as early as this past weekend?
Well, this is a unique case where Hamas terrorists who operated in Rafah under the underground in tunnels, they didn't know that a ceasefire was achieved. I'm not trying to justify Hamas. I just describe the situation.
Like they lost contact.
Exactly. And they ambushed soldiers of the IDF, thus killing 2 soldiers, 1 officer and 1 soldier. And Israel reiterated by eliminating one of Hamas's most strategic tunnels. This was the tunnel in which one of the hostages was held, El-Kana Bukhbut.
Right.
And Israel couldn't attack it before. The tragic outcome was that from this tunnel, 12 terrorists killed 12 Israeli soldiers over the last 6 months. So now Israel eliminated it. This is basically the description of what happened.
Yeah.
It is still to happen, I'm quite sure. Hamas is not going to stop fighting, but the conditions now are going to be way better because without hostages, Israel is way freer to operate. Now, there is another obstacle. President Trump allegedly said that the war is over, but President Trump emphasizes on a daily basis on Twitter or Truth Social that if Hamas does not surrender, he would greenlight Israel and thus to finish the job, as he said.
Yes, well, let's talk about that. Since the ceasefire went into effect, we've seen Hamas on the street, back in their uniform, really terrorizing their own people,
Right.
rounding up either people who they are alleging are collaborators or just opposition to Hamas. And really, it's really brutal to watch these videos of
Right.
them kidnapping, torturing, and killing people in broad daylight on the street. What contains that?
This is Hamas. I mean, by the way, I'm quite surprised that there are no protests against Hamas now by those who
Me
want
too.
exactly, but those who just want Palestinians to live freely.
Right.
And I see justifications for these acts because they are alleged collaborators. Hamas is a fundamentalist regime that massacres its opponents, be it Muslims or Christians or Jews. Now, they try to actually base their control in Gaza. I have to say I'm less worried about Hamas regaining control of Gaza because what made Hamas so monstrous was the Israeli cooperation or Israel coming to terms with the idea that Hamas is the government in Gaza, thus enabling, for instance, commodities to get into Gaza, concrete that used to build tunnels. As long as the equation is demilitarization versus recovery, I'm not worried. I will be worried if I see a change in this, if there would be a pressure on Israel to allow concrete, for instance, to enter Gaza without Hamas dismantling itself.
I think some onlookers will look at this situation and say, well, of course Hamas is going to reassert power because there's nothing else. It's like essentially people see it as a vacuum. And in
Right.
Trump's 20-point plan, there were these lofty goals of the international stabilization force, this technocratic governance structure, obviously ISF doing security, the technocrats doing the other things that Hamas was in charge of, like sanitation and civil governance. Of course, that hasn't come to fruition.
Right.
And some people are asking, why wasn't that ready on day one of the ceasefire so that Israel didn't find itself in the situation where Hamas is looking to reassert power and control?
So basically, it's a chicken and egg question.
Yeah.
The main debate within Israel, and by the way, of Israel and its allies, especially the U.S. under the Biden administration, was: is it better to have first an alternative power in Gaza and then dismantling Hamas, or the other way around? And the Israeli perception, which I personally support, says that there is no point in trying to build an alternative power as long as Hamas holds something like 50,000 Kalashnikov rifles in Gaza and a very sophisticated tunnel system. Why? Because let's remember how Hamas took power in the first place in 2007. They actually took over Gaza by throwing the Palestinian Authority officials from the roofs of Gaza. The only change since then is that there are no skyscrapers in Gaza anymore. But Hamas is still a gang of savages that will not hesitate to do the same. So if you want to create something else, you first have to crush Hamas.
Yeah.
Now, I'll give you an example how, in my opinion, it should be done. And I have to say, I just read a piece on the Wall Street Journal affirming what I thought in the first place, that there is going to be basically a two-state solution, but within Gaza Strip. You'll have...
People have, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, talked about this, like East and West Berlin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same, but before the wall was built. You'll have the West Gaza controlled by Hamas, lies in ruins, fundamentalist bombardments from time to time. And you'll have East Gaza controlled from security-wise by Israel, funded by the Emiratis, patronized by the United States, where you'll have, for instance, in 5 years from now, the new Rafah, a new sophisticated city with a demilitarized Gaza, without an education system that poisons the minds of Palestinians, and therefore the market force would actually work, because if you live in Gaza, which Gaza will you prefer? That's my assumption.
Right now, where are most Gazan civilians? On which side of the line?
On the Gazan side, on the Hamas side, of course.
Do you see a reality in which they
Sure.
would want to or be able to?
Yeah, sure, because they'll have way better conditions. Well, would the average?
But do you think Hamas would let them? And I say this because when, for example, GHF came in to try to shake up or change the status quo with regard to aid distribution,
Right.
which was previously under UNRWA control, which was linked to Hamas and so forth, Hamas
tried but failed. Because
Okay.
at the end of the day, they didn't want a single Gazan to get
Yeah.
an American-Israeli humanitarian aid, and they ended up when hundreds of thousands get it.
And just to finish the segment so everyone's with us, Hamas tried to stop civilians from
kill.
going to this other, right.
To
But you think a different situation could play out?
Yes.
Okay.
First and foremost, because it's going to be a permanent situation. All you have to do is just to walk towards East Gaza, New Gaza, if you want to call it like this, and being checked, see that you are not that you are unarmed, that you are not a Hamas member, that you are not a murderer, that you didn't take part in the October 7th massacre, and then you are free to go there. That's how I see it. And for my personal knowledge, the most senior American figures, and I mean really the most senior, told me that that's the scenario that they see. The other two scenarios, be it or a new Riviera, American Riviera in Gaza without Hamas, or Israeli military operation in Gaza, are not very. It's probable. It's possible, but not very probable.
I want to just go through some of the other reasons why this ISF platform is quite difficult to accomplish. You're saying in one sense because the disarmament, essentially you have to disarm first, and just to put a little more meat on that, all these countries that would potentially put forward their own soldiers don't want to put soldiers into a situation where they're embattled with Hamas.
Right.
That's one reason. The other reason being, on the Arab street in all of these countries, it's not so popular to have people think that they're sending soldiers with Israeli approval or on the backs of Israelis. And then, of course, the third being is a lot of the Arab countries that could contribute want to see some sort of commitments to statehood. So those are three big reasons.
Right.
The disarming seems to be arguably the most difficult and most important.
Yes.
I mean, it's all important, but how do you get past these obstacles?
Okay, I'll add the fourth obstacle. Israel has a very bad experience with international forces try to actually enforce or make sure the peace continues. It failed in Lebanon with UNIFIL. It failed in Syria with the UN forces. It failed with Egypt prior to the Six-Day War, when the UN was deported a few days before the war by the Egyptian president. So there is no reason to believe that what 5 Israeli commando divisions try to do for 2 years will be done by 2 battalions, 2 Emirati battalions in a few weeks.
Yeah.
It's naive to think like this. However, I think that now the pressure put on Hamas is way stronger, especially from the fact that Hamas sponsors and patrons, Qatar and Turkey, signed an agreement that actually says that Hamas has to step down, to step aside, to demilitarize. And I think it's not just empty words. I think my perspective about Qatar is that it started seeing Hamas as an obstacle on its way to actually have better relationship with the United States, for instance.
And I think we'll just take a quick beat on this because I think it's quite interesting. In one of your pieces, I think you described as like 2 train cars by the same engine.
Right.
And that Qatar itself is split between those who want better relationship with the West.
Exactly.
And then some in the royal family who have sympathy for Muslim Brotherhood. Can you sort of just like give us a little more on that? Because I think it's really critical.
Yeah, the mother of the emir is a very pro-Muslim Brotherhood, I would say even anti-Semitic, and there are more moderate figures within the Qatari establishment. But more than this, 8 years ago, Qatar felt the outcomes of having a fight with the United States when President Trump enabled Saudi Arabia and the UAE to actually put a siege on Qatar.
This is like 2017.
2017, yes.
Yeah.
Thus defining Qatar as a terror sponsor state.
Right.
I don't think they want to go back there. Now, I blame Israel for this because for the last 2 years, Israel enabled Qatar to not having to decide between the two trains. Because Israel enabled Qatar to be the moderator,
Yeah.
to host Hamas leadership, to have Al Jazeera that poisoned the mind of the entire Muslim world with a pro-Hamas propaganda.
Right.
And that's why I think, and I know it's heavily unpopular, that the failed assassination in Qatar, in Doha, was the most unsuccessful assassination attempt in its history. Because even President Trump today
Right.
said it, that he tried to distance himself from the assassination, although he had been pre-noticed. But he
denies that, but
okay,
just to put it out there.
okay, but I don't think Israel would have assassinated.
You think he knew?
Yeah.
Okay.
But more than this, he said that without the assassination, we wouldn't be sitting here today speaking about the deal. That's what he said to the Time magazine. So he's quite aware that it shaked the Middle East.
So as we move forward, just to close this out, do you think Qatar is more of an enabler to Hamas or more of a tool to Israelis' goals?
It used to be an enabler
But not
to
anymore.
Hamas. I hope not.
You hope not.
I see a change in Al Jazeera, and it's not the free press, right? I mean, they are directed. It's not an independent news channel. So all of a sudden, Hamas are no longer heroes. But if I can quote President Trump, we'll see about this.
So
we'll see what happens.
As we're having this conversation about building this governance structure or building this ISF, I think a lot of critics would say that's going to take too long.
Right.
And that instead we should try to revitalize or even not revitalize, put the PA, the Palestinian Authority, back into a position of leadership sooner because this is not, this everything else we're talking about, they would say is not going to happen.
Okay.
You know, Prime Minister Netanyahu, obviously, after the ceasefire went into effect, skipped going to Sharm el-Sheikh. Some people were, the stated reason was because of the Jewish holiday. Some people speculated because he didn't want to interact with Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the PA.
Yep.
What do you make of all of this, his decision not to go to Sharm el-Sheikh and this other parallel path, which is embrace the PA?
Okay, here's the big debate within the Israeli cabinet between the right and the more radical right. No one wants the Palestinian Authority to take over Gaza.
Can you, for the American audience, tell us why?
Okay, because there was an attempt, people say we should give the Palestinians a state. The Israeli experience says we tried to give the Palestinians a state twice. In 1993, Israel signed the Oslo Accords, thus inviting the former murderer Yasser Arafat to the West Bank and Gaza, believing that he is the Middle Eastern version of Nelson Mandela. However, Yasser Arafat, following becoming the president of the Palestinian Authority, en route to a Palestinian statehood, decided that this very specific Nelson Mandela is going to kill as many Israelis as possible, thus killing 1,200 Israelis over 5 years until he died in 2004. And then Israel made a full withdrawal from Gaza Strip, believing that a full withdrawal to the international border would give legitimacy to Israel. There was a state in Gaza, a Hamas state, heavily funded, living, give or take, peacefully. Israelis had no intention to reinvade Gaza. You know that the term in Israel, in Hebrew, go to hell is go to Gaza. Okay? So no one wants to go to hell, right?
Right.
And the outcome was 1,200 casualties in 5 hours. So if the outcome is of attempts to give Palestinian state or recognizing de facto a Palestinian statehood are a murderous massacres, so Israelis don't want them to have more statehood. However, there is difference between the ideological right and the security right. The ideological right says, hence we must annex the Judea and Samaria and Gaza, have settlements, propel emigration from Gaza and maybe even the West Bank, because this is our land, it's written in the Bible. I'll give an example. This part of the Israeli public would oppose even Gaza becoming American. Why? Because it should be Jewish. Okay, it's not only because of the Palestinians, but because of the Bible. Netanyahu and Ron Dermer, his closest ally, they see it from a security perspective. They say, we theoretically agree to a Palestinian Authority having sort of presence in Gaza as long as it is reformed, not funding terrorists, not teaching pupils to hate Jews and the Americans, and being a reliable partner. If you ask me whether Netanyahu believes it's going to happen, no. But he has no problem to theoretically greenlight it as long as the Palestinian Authority has to meet the conditions set by President Trump.
What do you think is the better path, to try to embrace this technocratic situation or try to bring the PA in sooner?
Okay, so I don't think there is a technocrat government possible as
Ever.
long as Hamas is there.
Okay.
Okay, and my problem is even bigger than President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu tried to say, because I think Hamas is not a dictator. It's not like Ceausescu in Romania that took over the country and is hated by the people. Hamas enjoyed and still enjoys a wide support in Gaza and in the West Bank. The only reason why President Abbas in Ramallah didn't go to the polls since 2006 is because he knows he's going to lose the election to Hamas. 68% of the West Bank population supported October 7th. 68%. And that's why I think the process is way longer than just having a technocrat government believing that it somehow become like Germany following World War II. It's not the case. I think it's going to take at least 20 years. And the first and foremost, the most important step is to change to radically change the education system.
The polls are a little difficult because of response bias, people feeling like maybe they can't answer honestly. I know there's some other polls that say support for Hamas in Gaza is closer to 37%. Do you really think it's that high, the poll that you gave?
You know what? I don't trust polls
Anywhere
following the last election campaigns in Israel and the States. I have a poll. I saw a poll on October 7th, and I saw the poll following the stories of the hostages to President Trump. What you saw in Gaza on that day was a pure joy to see the bodies of party goers dragged from motorbikes in the streets of Gaza. And what freed hostages told President Trump, and he keeps saying it, that they never met a single Gazan that helped them.
And there was the $5 million reward for...
That no one was willing to take.
Right. Do you think a reformed PA is possible?
No.
No. Okay.
Not in the next 20 years.
Well, I guess on that note, at Sharm el-Sheikh, Trump was reportedly having hushed conversations with Abbas. They were smiling. The reporting is interesting how it is that he was tapping his hand. And
I think
how do you read that?
I think it has more to do with the way Trump is doing business than with the way the Middle East works. I'll give an example. Let's see, President Trump ordered his people to directly negotiate with Hamas. Now, I must admit that had President Biden done the same, I would be shocked, disgusted, and I would I would see it as a betrayal. Why I don't see the same with President Trump? Because Biden, Obama, Clinton based their ideology on diplomacy. They used diplomacy as an ideological tool. If you recognize someone, you negotiate with them. Okay? But President Trump believes that no matter who the enemy is, 45 minutes a meeting would solve the problem. I'll give an example from the Far East. Kim Jong-un in 2017. Now, it failed there, but it succeeded here. So there is a difference between negotiating with someone and seeing him as an enemy. I think that Hamas will find out soon that the fact that the Khalil al-Khaya met Witkoff doesn't mean that President Trump is going to recognize Hamas.
It seems like big picture, phase 2 is totally dependent on Prime Minister Netanyahu getting aligned with Hamas's interlocutors, as we've been talking about, Turkey, Egypt, Qatar.
Right.
8 Arab countries have publicly supported Trump's 20-point plan. To your mind, what is the biggest roadblock right now?
Hamas.
Hamas.
Yeah, and you see that between the two goals of the Trump initiative, ending the war, ending the suffering, and dismantling Hamas, President Trump on a daily basis emphasizes that dismantling Hamas is more important. That's why he threatens that if Hamas does not demilitarize itself, he would greenlight Israel to do it as violently as possible.
Yeah.
And that's why I think at the end...
I'll just add, I think the exact quote was, if Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which was not the deal, we'll have no choice but to go in and kill them. He later clarified he wouldn't put U.S. troops on the ground.
Right.
J.D. Vance has said if Hamas refuses to cooperate, they will be obliterated. Like, they haven't exactly minced words.
Exactly.
So-
And that's why...
But do you think those are real threats?
Yes.
Yes.
You know why? Because I saw how, against all the odds, Hamas released the 20 live hostages because he came to the conclusion that it's a burden and not an asset. And the same can apply for the Hamas regime. And I think, and I trust the Israeli people, not necessarily the leaders, but the people, that they will not enable an Israeli withdrawal as long as Hamas does not dismantle.
If you were prime minister and you had...
I would have a panic attack. Yeah.
And Hamas is the biggest roadblock, as you've been saying. What's
Yeah.
the first thing you do tomorrow?
If Hamas refuses to dismantle,
Yeah.
I would give the army...
Well, even before, like, do you think that they can actually be negotiated with? I
No,
mean,
Hamas, no.
so then what is the path?
The path
what do
is...
people do?
No, first of all, I have an insurance policy. I hold 53% of Gaza Strip, thus preventing Hamas from invading yet again the kibbutzim.
Yeah.
I protect my citizens. As long as I block, as long as I envelope Gaza, it means that they cannot rearm, that they can no longer fire rockets at Israeli cities, at Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Sderot, etc. They used to have 15,000 rockets. Now they have a few hundred, and they can't fire them. So this is the second thing.
Well, the worry is that I think just more will come in the tunnels between Egypt and
Right,
Gaza.
but we control it now.
So
This is the
okay.
Philadelphia
Corridor. Yeah.
That President Biden opposed so heavily. He tried to prevent Israel from getting there. However, I would like to rearm myself both with missiles and legitimacy, because Israel suffered Israel lost ground dramatically and rapidly in the international community, and especially in the United States.
In the information war.
Exactly. So I would try to rearm myself and prepare myself for a second round somewhere in 2026 or 2027, which would be way faster because there are no hostages, way faster because you have more soldiers, more equipment, and with more support from the US president.
And better lay of the land and knowledge of the tunnel system.
Exactly, and more knowledge of the tunnel system, exactly.
In the past few days, there's been this term that keeps popping up called BB sitting,
Yeah.
which is, for those who don't know, a play on, obviously, Prime Minister Netanyahu,
Yeah.
nicknamed BB, and babysitting. And the idea is that, Trump, J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner
Right.
have all been in and out of Israel. I think J.D. is leaving today, and Marco Rubio is coming in, and the
Right.
idea is that they're all keeping an eye on him. I mean, the speculation is that they don't trust that he'll keep his end of the bargain on the ceasefire.
Right.
What do you make of this term and this media speculation over the BB sitting?
I have an alternative explanation. I see the J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio visits here as the beginning of the Republican primaries for the 2028 campaign. Rubio is considered to be a more pro-Israeli candidate. J.D. Vance comes from the MAGA movement. He was focused on domestic issues, but he's as far as I know, and I think I know, he's a very pro-Israeli. He has a very pro-Israeli approach, yet a bit different from Rubio's perspective. He sees Israel not through the lenses of Bible, etc., but through partnership.
Yep.
And partnership, by the way, means that we don't necessarily give you humanitarian military aid because you're a partner. You are not. We are not your nannies. So I don't think this is the case.
Right.
But we'll see. I mean, if I'm wrong, so once Rubio leaves, Israel is going to bomb Gaza, right?
That's what some of the speculate. Or I mean, no, but like that's how the media is portraying.
I don't think this is the case.
Okay. One interesting element as J.D. Vance was in Israel this week is he chose to comment on some of the internal legislation that was put forth in the Knesset over West Bank settlements.
Right.
He called it, I think the quote was, a very stupid political stunt. Just to give it a little bit more meat, there was obviously settler violence in the West Bank. There are these videos of fighting, clubbing. Then yesterday, some far-right politicians in parliament took some symbolic steps to give preliminary approval to a bill that would give Israel authority to annex some of the West Bank. Can you explain sort of what's happening?
Yeah, so here's the weird thing. The initiative was led by the opposition, not by part of the coalition.
Explain
that. The opposition tried to actually create a daylight to embarrass Netanyahu by legislating this, because there is a wide support for annexation within the Israeli public, but they knew that Netanyahu can't support it because President Trump had vetoed it a few weeks ago. So they brought it to the floor, and some of Netanyahu's coalition members voted for it. Likud members were not present at the vote, and it passed on a margin of 25 to 24, and it embarrassed Netanyahu. But I wouldn't see it as I don't think Netanyahu tried to annex the West Bank. I think this is the last thing he wants now. He understands that the lack of.
But would you say some people in his coalition would want that? No.
Of course, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, for instance.
Well, but I guess like the next logical critique would be he is indebted is not the right word, but reliant on them for his coalition to remain intact, and so therefore that's where the fear comes, I think, for some media critics. What do you make of that?
Netanyahu, in Israel, when you are a prime minister, you do not necessarily control every part of your coalition, especially not when you actually reach an election year and everyone is obsessed with their standings in the polls. Plus, just remember that Smotrich and Ben Gvir, the far right, were quite not obsessed, but they felt bitter following the way the war ended. They wanted annexation. They wanted
Well, so which one voted against the 20-point plan?
Both
of them did. Yeah.
So they had
that says something.
Exactly. So they wanted to take the revenge against Netanyahu.
One would say, I think, right now that the relationship between Trump and Bibi and the United States and Israel is quite positive.
Right.
And then some people look at some of this movement around the West Bank and say, like, why would this even be happening? It threatens the U.S. relationship.
Right.
Do you think it does threaten the U.S. relationship?
Not the settlements. I don't think this. I think this administration specifically is the most pro-settlement in the United States history. The ambassador almost lives in the West Bank, in the settlements. He is there more than he's in Jerusalem. Mike Johnson actually met Netanyahu in Shiloh, a settlement far away from Jerusalem. And he insisted on meeting Netanyahu in Shiloh, not the other way around. So I don't think this is the case. I think President Trump doesn't want annexation right now because he sees how important it is for the Arab countries. By the way, it's not the first time it happens. 5 years ago, Trump actually used the annexation threat in order to achieve the peace treaty, the Abraham Accords. The deal was Israel suspends the annexation plans for 4 years, thus getting in return a peace treaty with the UAE, Bahrain, Oman, and Morocco. So it's basically the same dynamics.
Back in 2021, Trump reportedly said, F him to Bibi, he's notoriously hot and cold. He also is trying to grow his relationship with other Arab countries. He did the big tour and, through Qatar and through
Right.
UAE and through Saudi and everywhere he went. I mean, I'm sort of like making a caricature
Right.
of it, but he was like, wow, this is beautiful. I love what you've done with the place. He clearly has interests there. And are you nervous that the relationship could change given his interest in maintaining other relationships with other Arab nations who have slightly different goals?
President Trump is one of the most stable presidents when it comes to supporting Israel. And, sometimes you watch a football game or a baseball game and you hate the commentary because you feel it's stupid. So you just watch it, muted. That's how I suggest people or recommend people to watch the Israeli-US relationship under President Trump. Just mute the commentators because there is a lot of noise, but at the end of the day, when you mute it and you see the steps and the measures taken by President Trump, you see, 100% support for Israel. You see, first and foremost, a U.S. attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. You see annexation, recognition of the annexation of the Golan Heights, moving the American embassy to Jerusalem, assisting Israel to release all the hostages, is threatening Hamas, etc., etc. I wouldn't be that worried if I were Prime Minister Netanyahu.
And just to add one point, it's not one directional. The Israeli intelligence goes to the U.S. That's very valuable. A lot of Americans don't realize that.
And technology, AI.
Yeah.
You know that
business.
There was Israel assassinated Hamas leaders by recognizing, using AI, the noise. Israel bombed a specific place, and then the noise was heard. And when you heard on the phone call where the leader is, you could analyze where he is and bomb him. So there is a lot of technology that Israel can offer the U.S. right now following the war.
Last question on this before we move to your book.
Yeah.
You earlier said that the war is sort of on pause. What happens after the pause when things are resumed? Does the war continue? Something else?
I think it will be different.
Different.
A different war. Without the hostages, the war would end way before October 2025. That's what prolonged the war. You can write a PhD about Israel's relations with its hostages over time. Israel is very sensitive, in my opinion, sometimes too sensitive. I'll give an example. There was a hostage held in a tunnel in Gaza. From this tunnel, as I told you, 12 attacks against IDF were initiated. I don't think the U.S. Army would actually come to terms with such a situation. But now it's going to be way faster. But I don't see it happening very soon.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
As throughout this conversation, themes from your book have trickled in, themes about building coalition, unity governments. And one theme that really stood out to me in your book was how so many prime ministers have struggled to relinquish power. You talk about Golda Meir, you talk about Bibi.
Right.
Unlike the U.S. government, the Israeli government structure is built in a way that sort of maybe enables this. Maybe I'm mischaracterizing. You'll tell me. Can you talk about the structure and how it has come to define Israeli society and how it basically ties into everything we're talking about now?
When Israel was established in 1948, there was a question how its electoral system are going to look like. And I personally think that if you want to understand the nation, look at two things. Its intelligence and its electoral system. Because the electoral system tells a lot about the country. For instance, the idea behind the UK's electoral system is stability. They want stability at any cost, even the cost that a party that got 30% of the popular vote will get an outright majority in parliament. In the US, the idea is checks and balances, because the bitter experience, the trauma of the American people was a British king, an English king, trying to force its will on a people far away. The idea behind Israel is of a diversified, very diverted society with immigrants from 70 countries,
Right.
most of them without a democratic experience. And the fear of the founding fathers of Israel was that if you are not represented on the Knesset and at the Knesset, you are going to initiate a civil war. Okay, that's why the threshold in Israel was so low. Now think about it as a huge structure consists of tiny, tiny Lego parts. Okay, that's how we build coalitions in Israel. The outcome, and now I don't think a civil war is an imminent threat on Israel's future, but the outcome is very problematic because if you're a prime minister in Israel, at the very same time, you are stronger than the US president in your homeland because you don't need to pass the Senate. The Knesset is yours. I mean, you have an automatic majority. And at the very same time, you're way weaker than the US president because the US president knows that he's here till 2029.
Sad.
And in Israel, you can always fall on Monday at 4 p.m. When no confidence vote are held at the Knesset.
So bring this into the present. Right now in 2026, there
Yes.
will be an election.
Right.
The question is, will a more centrist coalition emerge
Yes.
or not? Tied to what you're saying, what do you think happens?
Okay, so first of all, one has to understand that when it comes to Israel, it's not the case. It's not like the case in the States. In the States, it's either Donald Trump wins or Kamala Harris. In Israel, it can be undecided. Why? Because in Israel, you have to form a coalition, a 61 majority out of 120. Now, because there are at least 10 Arab Knesset members that don't join governments because they don't want to cooperate with to be part of of cabinet that sends soldiers to fight against Muslims, it means that if you get 50 seats, you don't win, but you don't lose either. And according to each and every poll, especially for example, a poll published an hour ago on Channel 12, Netanyahu gets 51. According to other polls, 55, 57, which means that he, at least now, okay, no one can actually defeat him. And if this is the outcome of the election, my guess and assumption and my hope as well is that a unity government will be formed. Because the differences between center or center-left and right in Israel are quite marginal these days. It's not like in the States, at least in my opinion. In the States, Republicans and Democrats have almost nothing in common. In Israel, they have a lot. It's a way smaller country, and that's why I hope a unity government would be the outcome of the next election.
Do you think it's likely?
Very likely.
Which there was a lot of Israeli politicians who left, for example, Bibi's war cabinet.
Right.
Do you think, people who have been maybe critical of him would come back into a unity government?
Yes.
After the past 2 years.
They don't say it right now, but I think it's an option. For instance, Bennett or Lieberman.
Yeah, exactly. Why?
Yair Lapid. Because I don't think Israelis would enable yet. And there was a crazy event of 5 consecutive election campaigns during 3.5 years. Israelis are not going back there. They believe that this is what led to the war, that our enemies saw a weak Israel fighting itself from the inside, neglecting the security in order to defeat the political opponent. So Israelis are not going to enable it. And I think there is that parties that will say we want unity will gain ground in the election. I even hear Netanyahu says it lately, and Netanyahu is not Mr. Unity in Israel over the last 30 years.
Do you think he holds on to the prime ministership?
Too early and too close to call.
Too soon.
Too soon to call, but I would say that now he has 51% of doing it.
Okay, so time will tell.
More than 50%.
I think a part of the question is, will people vote on sort of his firebrand? Well, you'll tell me
The question
his
is,
penchant for.
if the election is about October 7th failure, he's going to lose decisively. If the election is about the way the war ended, is about to win decisively. Since people can actually hold those two truths together, I guess that a new party, a new protest party would gain power from those who, at the very same time, want a more staunch line, a harder line in terms of security, like Netanyahu, but don't want the one who failed on October 7th to be the prime minister. So something in between can actually gain a lot of votes.
In this world where this unity government comes together, what will peace look like?
When we speak in Israel about a right and left or center left, it's not that there, on the other side that there are people that can promote a two-state solution, withdrawal, evacuating settlements, etc. Last month there was a vote at the Knesset about annexation. It was 99 against Palestinian statehood. It was 99 Knesset members against 7. 99 voted against the Palestinian statehood, and only 7 voted in favor of it. Something like this. This was the proportion. So if Netanyahu is to be defeated, you'll see the main difference in domestic issues. The ultra-Orthodox question, economy.
In terms of ultra-Orthodox serving.
Exactly, in the army. And sanctions against those who do not serve. But do not expect necessarily a dramatic change when it comes to the war.
And with regard to expanding Abraham Accords and, other international peacemaking, what do you think?
I would say that every stable government in Israel would sign at least 3 to 4 peace accords with Arab states. As far as I understand from my sources, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and even Lebanon are waiting for a stable government in Israel to expand the normalization.
Big picture, thinking back to your book, you talk about 13 critical decisions.
Right.
I learned a lot with regard to the merging of different parties, new parties established, how different ethnic groups fell into different party lines. Right. What are the biggest lessons and takeaways?
From Israel's politics?
Yeah. And the history that can teach us about the moment we're in and how to move forward?
I would say, first of all, that politics in Israel is organized around not economy like in the States, in most countries on earth, but about security or insecurity or fear. The very idea of Israel, and this is what people... I'll give an example. J.D. Vance's book taught me a lot about America that I didn't know. The hillbilly elegy. The Israeli elegy is the fact that no matter where you are in Israel right now, you are 80 minutes the most from someone armed who wants to kill specifically you if he only has the chance. And most of the times, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. This is what, this is why economy could never be the top issue, the top priority for voters. So this is the number one thing. If you want to offer Israelis hope, offer them security first.
Amit Segal, thank you so much.
Thank you, my pleasure.
For everyone watching, thank you for joining this live stream once again. His book is A Call at 4 a.m., 13 Prime Ministers and the Crucial Decisions That Shaped Israeli Politics. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And if I can add, I'm a big fan of the free press because I really appreciate courage. And I think courage is what the virtue that most necessary for journalists, especially against, the common nonsense. So common sense is the better answer. And thank you for this.
We appreciate you saying that. We'll have you back soon.
Thank you so much.